The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the farmyard. David Marshall hoisted his duffel bag, the rough canvas scratching against his calloused hands. His gaze drifted across the fields, a familiar ache in his chest. His best friend, Smitty, stood beside him, his face etched with a mixture of fear and determination. "Promise me something, Dave." Smitty's voice, usually boisterous, was subdued, almost a whisper. David met his friend's intense gaze, a knot tightening in his stomach. He knew what was coming, dreaded the weight of those words. "If anything happens," Smitty's voice cracked, "promise you'll go see my folks. Tell them." He paused, swallowed hard. "Tell them I was brave, that I didn't suffer." David looked away, the vastness of the sky mirroring the vastness of his dread. He couldn't make that promise, not this one. It felt like tempting fate, like acknowledging a truth he couldn't bear to face. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant cawing of crows. Smitty's hand, clammy with nervous sweat, gripped David's arm. His eyes, usually twinkling with mischief, held a desperate plea. "Please, Dave, for me." Smitty's voice was barely a whisper, but it pierced David's heart like a shard of ice. He couldn't deny his friend, not with that look in his eyes. "All right, Smitty," David mumbled, his voice thick with emotion. "I promise." The words felt heavy, leaden, a grim bargain struck in the shadow of impending war. Relief washed over Smitty's face, the tension easing from his shoulders. He gave David a quick, almost desperate hug. "Thanks, buddy. You're the best." The words were light, but the undercurrent of fear remained. David forced a smile, the taste of dread bitter on his tongue. As he boarded the bus, he glanced back at Smitty, their eyes locking one last time. The promise hung between them, a silent oath forged in the crucible of uncertainty. The ensuing months were a blur of grueling training and nervous anticipation. David found himself relying on the memory of Smitty's laughter to push him through the toughest drills. Their shared dream of returning home, of sipping lemonade on Smitty's porch, fueled his determination. Shipped to England, the reality of war hit David with full force. The constant drone of bombers overhead, the grim faces of returning soldiers, the ever-present fear, it was a far cry from the idyllic life they left behind. Yet, through it all, the promise to Smitty remained, a constant companion. Their bond deepened during the harrowing weeks leading up to D-Day. The shared danger, the constant fear of death, forged a connection deeper than brotherhood. They were two halves of the same soul, each relying on the other for strength and solace. David and Smitty landed on Omaha Beach amidst a chaotic symphony of gunfire, explosions, and screams. The air was thick with the smell of cordite and fear. As they fought their way off the beach, David clung to Smitty's presence, a beacon of familiarity in the maelstrom. The following weeks were a blur of hedgerow battles and relentless German resistance. David and Smitty witnessed horrors that would forever scar their souls, but they faced it together, their bond unbreakable. Until that fateful day near St. Lo. It happened in a flash. One moment Smitty was beside him, cracking a joke, the next he was sprawled on the ground, a crimson stain blooming on his chest. The world seemed to stop, the sounds of battle fading to a distant hum as David rushed to his friend's side. "Dave." Smitty's voice was a choked whisper, his hand reaching out, grasping at air. David gripped it, his own hand slick with blood, his heart shattering into a million pieces. "I'm here, buddy. Hold on." The words were hollow, meaningless in the face of such devastating loss. Smitty's eyes, filled with pain and fading light, met his. A choked gasp escaped Smitty's lips, his hand going limp in David's grasp. Section 5. Echoes of War. Europe's Scars. The war raged on, but for David, a part of him died on that battlefield in Normandy. He carried on, driven by a promise made and a grief so profound it threatened to consume him. He fought with a cold, detached fury, his only solace the thought of fulfilling his vow to Smitty. As the Allied forces pushed deeper into Europe, David witnessed the devastating toll of war. Bombed-out cities, starving civilians, the stench of death. Each sight a stark reminder of the fragility of life, of the preciousness of the promise he carried. He wrote to Smitty's family, a task that filled him with dread and a strange sense of duty. He wrote of Smitty's bravery, of his kindness, of the shared dreams that would never be realized. He poured his grief into those letters, seeking solace in sharing their loss. Through it all, David clung to the hope of fulfilling his promise in person. He imagined standing on Smitty's porch, sharing stories of their friendship, offering solace to a grieving family. It was a beacon of light in the darkness, a goal that kept him going. Section 6. Homecoming and Heartache, Smitty's Family. The war finally ended, but for David, there was no sense of victory, only a profound sense of loss and the weight of his promise. Returning home was bittersweet. He was greeted with joy, but every smile, every celebratory cheer was tinged with sorrow. He finally made his way to Smitty's hometown, his heart pounding in his chest. Standing on the familiar porch, he felt a surge of emotion. Smitty's parents greeted him with tears and open arms, their grief palpable. Sharing stories of Smitty, David felt a flicker of warmth amidst the pain. He spoke of his friend's humor, his kindness, his unwavering spirit. He saw in their eyes a reflection of his own grief, a shared ache for the life cut short. As he left the small town, the weight of his promise lifted, replaced by a quiet sense of peace. He had honored his friend, kept his vow, and found a measure of solace in sharing their loss with those who loved Smitty most. Section 7. A Promise Fulfilled, the Letter. Years passed. David built a life, a family of his own, but the memory of Smitty, of the war, never truly faded. He kept in touch with Smitty's parents, their bond forged in shared grief and gratitude. One day, he received a letter from Smitty's mother. Inside, nestled amongst the familiar, looping handwriting, was another letter, yellowed with age. It was addressed to Smitty, the return address a military post office in Europe. With trembling hands, David opened the letter. It was from him, written in the heat of battle, a testament to their friendship, filled with humorous anecdotes and heartfelt words of affection. At the end, a simple sentence. "Come home safe, buddy, I'll be waiting." Tears streamed down David's face as he read the words, his heart aching with a mix of sorrow and gratitude. In that moment, he realized the true power of the promise. It had not only brought solace to Smitty's family, but it also provided him with a tangible link to his fallen friend, a precious reminder of their bond. Section 8. Scars and Memories, the War Within. The war, though long over, continued to cast a long shadow over David's life. He was haunted by nightmares, the sights and sounds of battle forever etched in his memory. The guilt of survival, the burden of witnessing such horrors, weighed heavily on his soul. He sought solace in the company of fellow veterans, men who understood the darkness that lingered, the invisible scars that ran deep. They shared stories, offered support, and found comfort in their shared experiences. David became an advocate for peace, speaking out against the horrors of war, urging understanding and compassion for those who served. He dedicated his life to honoring the memory of those lost, to ensuring that their sacrifice was never forgotten. The war had taken so much, but it had also instilled in him a deep appreciation for life, for love, for the simple joys that he had almost taken for granted. He lived each day with a grateful heart, determined to make the most of the time he had been given. Section 9. A Life Shaped by War, the Enduring Impact. David Marshall lived a long and fulfilling life, a life shaped by the crucible of war and the enduring power of a promise made. He never forgot Smitty, their friendship a guiding light in his life. The promise he made in that farmyard so many years ago had become a defining force, shaping his actions, his values, his very being. It was a testament to the enduring bonds of friendship, the sacrifices made in the name of freedom, and the resilience of the human spirit. As he grew older, David found solace in sharing his story, in passing on the lessons learned from the war. He spoke to his grandchildren about courage, about sacrifice, about the importance of peace. And so the legacy of that fateful promise lived on, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, hope, love, and the bonds of human connection can endure. It was a story of loss and sacrifice, but ultimately, it was a story of love, friendship, and the enduring power of the human spirit.